At my husband's company gala, his boss leaned over and said with a smirk, "Must be nice being a nobody while your husband runs the show." The entire table erupted in laughter, including my husband, Dwayne. I set down my wine glass, smiled directly at the CEO, and said, "How does it feel knowing this nobody owns 73% of your company and signs every single one of your paychecks?" The room fell silent. His champagne glass slipped from his hand. "How does it feel being a nobody?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. George Suffolk asked me that question at exactly 8:47 p.m. on a Saturday night in the Grand Ballroom of the Belmont Hotel in downtown Portland. His voice carried across our table of 12, loud enough that the neighboring tables turned to watch. He swirled his bourbon, ice clinking against crystal, and his eyes gleamed with the particular cruelty of a man who thinks he's untouchable. "Must be nice," he continued, gesturing at me with his glass, "sitting at home all day while your husband here," he clapped Dwayne on the shoulder, "runs the show. Building empires. Making real money. What do you do again, Olivia? Arrange flowers? Plan charity galas?" The laughter started immediately. Not polite chuckles or nervous giggles, but genuine, cruel amusement. Connor Klein from accounting nearly choked on his steak. Mary Ann Harper, the VP of operations, threw her head back and laughed so hard her diamond earrings caught the chandelier light. Even the servers paused their rounds to watch the show. And Dwayne? My husband of 18 years? He gave an uncomfortable laugh, not quite meeting my eyes, like he was afraid to do anything else. I'd been called worse things than a nobody. I'd been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated for nearly 2 decades. I'd made peace with being invisible, with being the woman who existed in the margins of my own life while my husband took center stage. But tonight, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way George's eyes glittered with satisfaction. Maybe it was how Dwayne wouldn't look at me, too busy seeking his boss's approval. Maybe it was just that I was tired, bone tired of the act, soul tired of the pretending. Or maybe I was just done hiding. I reached for my wine glass, a 2019 Bordeaux that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the laughter to die down into expectant grins. Then I set the glass down with a soft click that somehow carried across the entire ballroom. "George," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Can I ask you a question?" He leaned back in his chair, supremely confident, playing to his audience. "Sure, sweetheart. Ask away." "How does it feel," I said, maintaining eye contact, "knowing that this nobody, this flower arranging, charity planning, stay-at-home wife, owns 73% of Meridian Solutions? How does it feel knowing that I sign every single one of your paychecks? That I approved your salary? That your job, your title, your corner office with the view of the Willamette River, all of it exists because I allow it to exist?" The champagne glass slipped from George's hand. It didn't shatter, the carpet was too thick for that, but it hit the table edge first, sending champagne splashing across his custom Armani suit. He didn't notice. He was too busy staring at me like I'd just announced I was an alien from Mars. The silence that fell over our table spread outward like ripples in a pond. Conversations at neighboring tables faltered and stopped. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. The string quartet in the corner finished their piece and didn't start another, as if they too were waiting to hear what would happen next. Mary Ann Harper's mouth literally hung open, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Connor Klein had gone pale, his hand pressed flat against the table as if he needed to steady himself. And Dwayne, my husband, my partner of so many years, the man who thought he was the star of this particular show, looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. His champagne glass was still raised mid-air, but his hand had started shaking. George finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "That's impossible. Meridian Solutions is privately held by Cascade Investment Group," I finished for him, still smiling. "Which is wholly owned by Helix Capital Partners." which is, in turn, a subsidiary of Nightingale Holdings. I'm sure you've heard of them, George. You should have. They're listed on every single one of your corporate documents. Every contract you've signed. Every quarterly report you've submitted. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm Nightingale Holdings, George. I've owned controlling interest in Meridian Solutions for the past 12 years. Every promotion you've received. I approved it. Every bonus. I signed off on it. That company car you drive? The one with the heated seats and the premium sound system? You're welcome. George's face had progressed from pale to gray. He looked like he might be sick. Dwayne knew, of course, I said, turning to look at my husband for the first time since George had called me a nobody. Didn't you, honey? But Dwayne's expression told me everything I needed to know. He had no idea. None whatsoever. For 12 years, I'd been hiding in plain sight. The invisible woman. The corporate wife. The nobody. And now, at 8:49 p.m. on a Saturday night in the Belmont Hotel ballroom, with 200 of Portland's business elite watching in stunned silence, I just stepped out of the shadows. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you how a nobody became the woman who held all the power, while everyone around her was too blind to see it. But let me rewind. Let me take you back to that morning, 12 hours before I became the most talked about woman in Portland's business community. Back when I was still playing the role I'd refined over nearly 2 decades, the devoted wife, the invisible woman, the nobody. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., same as it had every weekday for years. Dwayne didn't stir. He never did anymore. The alarm was technically for both of us, but somewhere around year 5 of our marriage, it had become just mine. My job to wake up. My job to start the day. My job to make sure his world ran smoothly before he even opened his eyes. I slipped out of bed in our Laurelhurst home, the house everyone thought Dwayne's salary had bought, the house with the wraparound porch and the garden that backed onto the park. The morning air was cool, October in Portland, the kind of gray dawn that promised rain by afternoon. The kitchen was my domain at this hour. I moved through it in the near darkness, not bothering with lights yet. I didn't need them. I knew where everything was. The coffee beans in the second cupboard, the grinder on the counter, the navy blue mug on the shelf that Dwayne's father had given him when he graduated from Portland State. 2 creams, 1 sugar. Always 2 creams, 1 sugar. While the coffee brewed, I started on his breakfast. Scrambled eggs, 3 of them, cooked soft but not runny. 2 pieces of whole wheat toast, butter on one, honey on the other. A small bowl of mixed berries on the side. Orange juice, no pulp, in the glass with the University of Oregon logo. Years of this routine, and I could do it in my sleep. Sometimes I think I actually did. My phone buzzed on the counter at exactly 6:15 a.m. A text from Selena Chen, my attorney and the only person on earth who knew the truth about who I really was. Board meeting confirmed for Monday. Quarterly reports show 31% increase over last year. Your portfolio now valued at $847 million. Have a lovely weekend, Olivia. I deleted the message immediately. Habit. The same habit that had kept my secret safe for 12 years. Dwayne thought I spent my days at book clubs and yoga classes. He thought the money in our accounts came from his 6-figure salary at Meridian Solutions. He had no idea that his salary was less than what I made in interest in a single week. He had no idea that the company where he worked, where he'd built his entire career, where he spent 60 hours a week chasing the approval of men like George Suffolk, I owned it. All of it. Well, 73% of it, to be precise. Enough to control every major decision. Enough to hire and fire the entire executive team if I wanted to. Enough to shut the whole thing down with a single phone call. But I didn't. Because Dwayne needed to feel important. He needed to feel like the provider, the breadwinner, the successful husband with the supportive wife waiting at home. And for so many years, I'd given him that. I'd played the part so well that even I sometimes forgot it was an act. Liv? His voice drifted down from upstairs, still rough with sleep. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Is my coffee ready? Coming right up, I called back, pouring the coffee into his mug. I heard the shower turn on upstairs. 30 minutes, as always. Another thing I could set my watch by. While he showered, I'd lay out his clothes for the day, the charcoal suit for tonight's company gala, the burgundy tie that made him look distinguished, the Italian leather shoes I'd bought him last Christmas. Everything in its place. Everything running like a machine that I'd been operating for so long I'd forgotten there was any other way to live. Except that wasn't quite true, was it? I'd always known. Every single morning, when I opened my laptop after Dwayne left for work, when I logged into my accounts, when I reviewed portfolios and authorized transactions and made decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars, I knew exactly who I was. I just hadn't told anyone else yet. The coffee was getting cold. I picked up the mug and headed for the stairs, already mentally running through the rest of the day's schedule. Hair appointment at 2. Manicure at 3:30. Home by 5 to start getting ready for tonight's gala. Tonight. The annual Meridian Solutions executive dinner at the Belmont Hotel. The one event each year where I was required to play the dutiful corporate wife in front of everyone who mattered in Dwayne's world. I had no idea that by the end of the night, I'd be done playing that role forever. That George Suffolk would call me a nobody, and I'd finally, tell the truth. But I'm still getting ahead of myself. Let me show you how that morning really unfolded. I found Dwayne standing in front of his closet, towel wrapped around his waist, staring at his suits like they were written in a foreign language. The closet was walk-in, bigger than most people's bedrooms, organized by season and color. Everything pressed, everything where it should be, everything I'd spent 3 hours last Sunday reorganizing. The charcoal or the navy? He asked without looking at me. I set his coffee on the dresser. Charcoal. It's the executive gala tonight, remember? George will be wearing navy, he always does. You don't want to match. Right. He grabbed the suit I'd already pulled out and laid across the chair. Thanks. No eye contact. No acknowledgement that I'd anticipated his question before he asked it. No recognition that I knew George Suffolk's wardrobe preferences better than George probably did himself, because I paid attention to everything while everyone else assumed I was thinking about nothing. He took a sip of coffee and made a face. This is cold. I made it 20 minutes ago when you were supposed to be up. Well, can you make a fresh pot? I've got the Morrison call at 8:30. I need to be sharp. The Morrison call. The one I'd reminded him about 3 times yesterday. The one I'd already pulled up all his notes for and left on his desk in the study. The one where he'd pitch a marketing strategy that I'd drafted while he was watching basketball Thursday night. Of course, I said. I'll bring it up in 5 minutes. He was already on his phone, scrolling through emails, dismissing me. I picked up the cold coffee and headed back downstairs. In the kitchen, I dumped the coffee down the sink and started a fresh pot. While it brewed, I pulled out my own phone, not the iPhone everyone knew about, but the secondary one I kept in the bottom of my purse. The one registered to a business entity. The one that couldn't be traced back to me. 3 missed calls from Selena. A text that just said, "Call me." Important. I glanced toward the stairs, heard the shower still running, Dwayne's second shower, the one he always took after he'd already showered, just to wake up properly. I had maybe 10 minutes. Selena answered on the first ring. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The good kind. Whitmore Tech wants to buy Meridian Solutions. All-stock deal. They're offering $1.2 billion. I gripped the counter. $1.2 billion. My 73% stake would be worth just under $900 million in Whitmore stock, Selena finished, reading my mind. They want to move fast. Meeting proposed for next Friday. Does anyone at Meridian know? Not yet. They came directly to Nightingale Holdings. They don't even know you exist, Olivia. They think they're negotiating with some shadowy investment group. She paused. You could take the deal. Cash out. Disappear. Start over somewhere else. Live on a beach. Never arrange another flower or press another shirt. The coffee maker beeped. I poured a fresh cup, muscle memory taking over. Or? I asked. Or you could show up to that meeting yourself. Walk in the door. Introduce yourself as the actual owner. Watch every single person in that room realize they've been working for you this whole time. Upstairs, the shower shut off. I had maybe 3 minutes before Dwayne would be calling for his coffee. Let me think about it, I said. You've been thinking about it for 12 years, Olivia. When are you going to stop hiding? I ended the call and deleted the record of it, another habit so ingrained I barely noticed anymore. The secondary phone went back into the bottom of my purse, buried under receipts and grocery lists and all the other debris of my fake life. By the time Dwayne came downstairs, I was standing in the kitchen with his fresh coffee, his breakfast laid out, his briefcase by the door with all his meeting notes organized how he liked them. You're a lifesaver, he said, kissing my cheek without really looking at me. He picked up a piece of toast and checked his watch. I've got to run. Don't wait up tonight, the gala will probably run late. George wants to schmooze some potential investors. Potential investors. I almost laughed. George was going to spend tonight schmoozing people to invest in a company I already owned. What should I wear tonight? I asked, playing my part. The black dress. The one with the sleeves. Nothing too flashy, these are business people, not a fashion show. The black dress that made me invisible. The one designed to help me blend into the wallpaper while the men talked about important things. Sounds good, I said. I'll be ready. He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, already on his phone, already forgetting I existed. I watched him go, sipping my own coffee, the one I'd finally poured for myself. Tonight at the gala, George Suffolk would call me a nobody. And tonight, I'd finally stop pretending he was right. My mother called at 11:30, right on schedule. Every Saturday, same time, like clockwork. I was in the garden pretending to care about the roses that our landscaper maintained when my phone rang. Olivia, darling. Lunch today at the club? The club. The Waverly Heights Country Club where my mother had been a member for 35 years, where she'd taught me to play tennis on courts I hadn't set foot on in a decade, where she still hoped I'd somehow transform back into the daughter she'd raised. I can do 1 o'clock, I said, already mentally rearranging my afternoon. Hair appointment pushed to 3, manicure to 4:30. It would be tight, but I could make it work. I always made it work. Perfect. I'll reserve our usual table. The usual table. Overlooking the 18th hole, where my father used to play every Sunday before the heart attack took him 6 years ago. The table where Mom could watch the current generation of ambitious men and secretly judge them all against the memory of my dad. I arrived at 12:55, early enough to not be late but not so early that I'd seem eager. My mother was already seated, ramrod straight in her cream-colored St. John's suit, her silver hair styled in the same elegant bob she'd worn since 1987. She'd kept her maiden name, Martha Chin, even after 30 years of marriage to my father, Douglas. A small rebellion that she'd held onto when she'd given up everything else. You look tired, she said instead of hello. I'm fine, Mom. That's what you said when you deferred from Wharton, too. She took a sip of her water, ice cubes clinking. Right before you married Dwayne and threw away everything your father and I worked for. Here we go. The same conversation we'd been having for years, just with slightly different words each time. I didn't throw anything away. I deferred. For 1 semester that turned into forever. She set down her glass with more force than necessary. Do you know what your father said when you got accepted to Wharton? He called everyone we knew. His daughter, going to the best business school in the country. Following in his footsteps. I'd heard this story 100 times, but I let her tell it anyway. It was easier than fighting. And then you met Dwayne at that summer internship, and suddenly business school didn't matter anymore. Suddenly all those plans, all that potential, gone. Because you fell in love with a boy who needed you to make him feel important. The waiter appeared, saving me from having to respond. We both ordered salads, wedge for her, Caesar for me, and the moment he left, Mom leaned forward. Your father left you that insurance money because he believed in you, Olivia. Because he thought you'd do something with your life. Build something. Become something. Not waste it on, she gestured vaguely at me, at my existence. Whatever this is. If only she knew. If only I could tell her that Dad's insurance money, the $500,000 that everyone thought went toward our house down payment and Dwayne's business school loans, had been the seed money for everything. That I'd turned that $500,000 into almost $1 billion. That I'd built exactly what Dad had hoped I would, just in secret, in the shadows, where no one could see. I'm happy, Mom. Are you? She studied my face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Because you look like someone going through the motions. You look like I did the year before your father died, when I'd stopped being Martha Chen and had just become Douglas Chen's wife. That hit harder than I expected. My mother had been a corporate attorney before she married Dad. She'd given it all up when I was born, became the ideal executive wife, threw dinner parties and joined committees and smiled through 30 years of being introduced as Doug's wife, instead of by her own name. Tonight's Dwayne's company gala, I said, changing the subject. At the Belmont. Ah, yes. The annual parade where wives are trotted out like show horses. She picked at her salad. Which dress are you wearing? Let me guess, the black one with sleeves? The one that makes you disappear? How did you? Because that's what we do, darling. We disappear. We make ourselves small so our husbands can feel big. We hide our intelligence so they can feel smart. We bury our ambitions so they can chase theirs. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Your father was a good man, Olivia. I loved him. But the woman I was before I married him? She had dreams too. She had plans. And she gave them all up because that's what we were told good wives did. Our salads arrived. We ate in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken truths sitting between us like a third person at the table. Mom, I started, then stopped. I wanted to tell her everything. About Nightingale Holdings. About Meridian Solutions. About how I'd taken Dad's legacy and built an empire. About how I'd been hiding in plain sight for 12 years, pretending to be exactly what everyone expected while secretly controlling everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. What, darling? Nothing, I said. Just, thank you for lunch. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that looked like understanding. Like maybe she knew I was hiding something. Like maybe she hoped I was. Enjoy your gala tonight, she said softly. Try not to disappear completely. The hair salon was running behind, naturally. I sat in the waiting area flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading, watching the clock tick toward 3:30. My phone buzzed, the regular one this time, the one Dwayne knew about. A text from him, can you pick up my dry cleaning? Need the navy suit for Monday's presentation. I typed back, already picked it up. It's in your closet. Because of course I had. Because I always did. Because anticipating his needs before he had them was what I'd been doing for so long it had become automatic. Olivia Jonas? The stylist called my name, and I followed her back to the chair. Just a trim today, I said, the same thing I said every 6 weeks. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make Dwayne notice. Nothing that would make me stand out at tonight's gala. Just enough maintenance to look presentable, polished, appropriate. The ideal invisible wife. My secondary phone buzzed in my purse while the stylist worked. I waited until she stepped away to mix color for another client before checking it. Selena again, Whitmore wants an answer by Wednesday. Also, quarterly dividends posted. Your account just increased by $3.2 million. Enjoy your hair appointment. $3.2 million. From a single quarter's dividends. More money than most people made in a lifetime, deposited into my account while I sat in a salon chair getting my hair trimmed so I wouldn't outshine my husband at his company party. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled up my banking app, the one I kept hidden, the one nobody knew about. The account balance stared back at me, $847,293,441. $847 million. Give or take. I'd started with $500,000 of Dad's insurance money 12 years ago. Dwayne thought that money had gone toward our house down payment, $300,000, and his MBA loans, $200,000. He had no idea I'd paid those expenses with my own money, from the small trust fund my grandmother had left me. The money everyone knew about, the acceptable money that a wife could have. Dad's insurance money? That had gone somewhere else entirely. I'd spent the first 2 years just learning. Reading everything I could about venture capital, private equity, investment structures. I'd taken online courses under a fake name. I'd built relationships with attorneys and accountants and advisors, all of them believing they were working for a client named O.J. Nightingale. The name had been Dad's idea, in a way. His favorite bird was the nightingale. He used to say they sang most beautifully in the dark, when no one was watching. By year 3, I'd turned that $500,000 into $2 million through careful investments in tech startups. By year 5, it was $15 million. By year 7, I had enough to start acquiring serious stakes in established companies. And then I'd found Meridian Solutions. Dwayne had been working there for about a year when I started looking at it 12 years ago. He'd come home every night complaining about the leadership, about how the founders were running it into the ground, about how they couldn't see the potential right in front of them. He'd draft entire business plans at our kitchen table, passionate and brilliant and totally ignored by the executives who thought they knew better. So I'd bought the company. Quietly. Through companies within companies, enough layers that no one could trace it back to me. I'd structured it so that Nightingale Holdings owned Helix Capital Partners, which owned Cascade Investment Group, which owned 73% of Meridian Solutions. And then I'd waited. I'd watched as the new board, the one I'd appointed, slowly pushed out the old guard and brought in fresh leadership. I'd approved George Suffolk's hiring as CEO because his credentials were impressive and his 5-year plan was solid. I'd signed off on every major decision, every acquisition, every pivot that had transformed Meridian from a struggling software company into what it was today. And through it all, Dwayne had no idea. He thought he was climbing the corporate ladder through his own merit, through his own hard work. He thought George Suffolk had mentored him out of recognition of his talent. He thought his promotions and bonuses and corner office had been earned through long hours and brilliant strategies. He had no idea his wife had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. All done, the stylist said, spinning my chair to face the mirror. I looked the same as when I'd walked in. Neatly trimmed. Appropriately styled. Forgettable. It's great, I said, and meant it. I paid in cash, always cash for personal expenses, never a paper trail, and headed to my manicure appointment. Neutral pink polish, nothing flashy. The kind of nails that wouldn't draw attention, wouldn't make anyone at tonight's gala look twice. My phone buzzed again as I was leaving. Selena, one more thing. George Suffolk is planning to announce his resignation at Monday's board meeting. Insider trading investigation. Did you know? I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. No. I didn't know. But I was about to find out exactly what George had been hiding. And something told me tonight's gala was about to get a lot more interesting. I texted Selena back from my car, "Tell me everything." Her response came through in seconds. SEC opened investigation 3 weeks ago. Suffolk's been trading on non-public information. Used his brother-in-law's account to hide it. They have paper trails. He's done. Call me when you can. 3 weeks. George Suffolk had been under federal investigation for 3 weeks, and he'd said nothing to the board. Nothing to the other executives. He just kept showing up to work, kept making decisions, kept acting like everything was fine while the walls closed in around him. And tonight, he'd be at the gala. Smiling, schmoozing, pretending his world wasn't crumbling. I pulled out of the salon parking lot and headed toward the manicure place, my mind racing. If George resigned Monday, the board would need a new CEO. They'd want someone internal, someone who knew the company. Someone like. My phone rang. Dwayne. Hey, I answered. What's up? Where are you? I tried calling the house. Manicure appointment. For tonight. Remember? Right. He sounded distracted. Listen, George just called. He wants me to give a toast at the gala tonight. To the executive team. He specifically requested me. Of course he did. George was scrambling, trying to secure allies before the investigation became public. Trying to make sure he had people in his corner when everything fell apart. That's great, honey, I said, playing my part. You'll be wonderful. I need to write something. Can you help when you get home? You're good with words. I'm good with words. As if the dozens of presentations I'd written for him over the years were just a little hobby. As if the strategy documents I'd drafted, the emails I'd edited, the speeches I'd crafted, as if all of that was just me being helpful, and not me literally doing his job while he took the credit. Of course, I said. I'll be home by 5. You're the best, Liv. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd fail, I thought. You'd crash and burn without me propping you up, editing your work, fixing your mistakes, managing your life. But I said, see you soon. The manicure took 40 minutes. Neutral pink, as planned. The technician tried to upsell me on a gel treatment, some special formula that would make my nails stronger. I declined. I didn't need stronger nails. I needed invisible ones. Nails that wouldn't make anyone look twice at my hands when I passed them a wine glass or gestured during polite conversation. I got home at 5:15. Dwayne was in his study, surrounded by crumpled papers, looking stressed. I can't get the tone right, he said when I appeared in the doorway. It needs to be appreciative but not sappy. Professional but warm. George wants me to mention the Singapore deal, but I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I walked over and looked at what he'd written. It was terrible. Rambling, unfocused, trying too hard to impress everyone at once. Start over, I said. Keep it simple. 3 points, gratitude for the opportunity, recognition of the team's hard work, excitement for the future. 2 minutes max. I sat down at his computer and typed while he stood behind me, watching. Within 15 minutes, I'd written a toast that was just right, heartfelt without being emotional, confident without being arrogant, exactly what George wanted to hear. This is great, Dwayne said, reading over my shoulder. You should have been a speechwriter or something. Or something. Like a CEO. Like the person who owned the company he was toasting. I'm going to get ready, I said, standing. The car's coming at 7. In our bedroom, I pulled out the black dress. The one with sleeves. The one Dwayne had chosen for me without choosing it, just by telling me not to wear anything flashy. It was Prada, purchased 3 years ago for another corporate event, worn a dozen times since. Elegant enough to fit in, boring enough to disappear. I put it on and studied myself in the mirror. The dress fit well. My hair looked nice. My makeup would be appropriate. Everything about me screamed, dutiful corporate wife. No one would look at me tonight and see power. No one would look at me and see the woman who could end their careers with a phone call. No one would see anything except what they expected to see, Dwayne's supportive wife, smiling in the background while the important people talked about important things. My secondary phone buzzed one more time. Selena, SEC raid scheduled for Monday morning. George's office will be first. Thought you should know. I deleted the message and slipped the phone into my clutch, a different clutch than usual, one with a hidden pocket I'd sewn in myself. The kind of detail no one would ever notice. Downstairs, I heard Dwayne practicing his toast, his voice carrying up the stairs. Thanking George. Praising George. Celebrating George's leadership. I applied my lipstick, neutral pink, matching my nails, and smiled at my reflection. Tonight was going to be very interesting indeed. The town car arrived at 7 o'clock sharp. The Belmont Hotel stood downtown like a monument to old Portland money, all marble columns and Art Deco lighting. Our town car pulled up to the circular drive where valets in burgundy uniforms rushed to open doors. I could see other executives arriving, the men in dark suits, the wives in cocktail dresses that ranged from tasteful to trying too hard. Dwayne was on his phone before we'd even reached the entrance. Yeah, I've got the projections. Send them to my email. I'll review before the Monday meeting. I walked beside him, invisible already. We passed through the gold-trimmed doors into the lobby where crystal chandeliers threw soft light across polished floors. A string quartet played something classical in the corner. Servers circulated with champagne on silver trays. Dwayne. George Suffolk materialized from the crowd, hand extended, smile wide and bright. Up close, though, I could see the tightness around his eyes. The forced quality of his enthusiasm. A man holding on by his fingernails. George, good to see you. Dwayne shook his hand warmly, oblivious to the desperation rolling off his boss in waves. George's eyes flicked to me for half a second. Olivia. You look nice. Nice. The most dismissive compliment in the English language. The word you used when you had to acknowledge someone's existence but couldn't be bothered to actually look at them. Thank you, I said, smiling the smile I'd refined over the years. Warm but not too warm. Present but not imposing. There but not really there. The ballroom's this way, George said, already turning back to Dwayne. I've got you at the executive table. Front and center. You're going to knock that toast out of the park. The toast I wrote, I thought. The words I crafted while you were busy covering up your insider trading. But I followed them into the ballroom, clutch in hand, playing my role. The Belmont's grand ballroom was everything you'd expect: soaring ceilings, more chandeliers, round tables dressed in white linens with elaborate centerpieces. At least 200 people were already mingling, the noise level rising as champagne flowed and voices competed to be heard. Our table was indeed front and center, with a small placard reading, Executive Leadership. George sat at the head, naturally. Dwayne to his right. Connor Klein, the CFO, to his left. Marianne Harper, VP of Operations, beside Connor. And various other executives and their appropriately dressed wives filling out the remaining seats. I ended up between Dwayne and a VP of Sales whose name I could never remember, Todd? Ted, who didn't acknowledge me at all. Dinner was served, some kind of chicken with asparagus that everyone picked at while networking continued over plates. George stood halfway through the meal and tapped his wine glass with a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. His voice carried across the ballroom, confident and smooth. Years of practice at being the center of attention. Before we get to dessert, I wanted to take a moment to recognize some of the incredible talent at this table. He launched into a speech about quarterly earnings, about the Singapore expansion, about Meridian Solutions' bright future. And as he talked, I watched him carefully. Watched the way his hand gripped the wine glass a little too tight. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The way he kept glancing at the exits like a man planning his escape route. He knew. He knew the SEC was coming. He knew his world was about to implode. And he was going to go down swinging, taking everyone he could with him. And now, George said, his smile sharpening, I'd like to invite Dwayne Jonas to say a few words. Dwayne stood, adjusting his tie, the burgundy one I'd selected this morning, and cleared his throat. The room settled into polite attention, 200 faces turning toward our table. He delivered the toast word for word as I'd written it. Every pause, every gesture. It was good. Gracious without being sappy, confident without being arrogant. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and George clapped him on the shoulder as he sat back down. Beautifully said, George announced to the table. That's the kind of leadership that makes Meridian great. Intelligence, dedication, and the ability to inspire. He paused, taking a long sip of his bourbon. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have a supportive spouse who keeps the home fires burning while you're building empires. Polite laughter rippled around the table. The kind of laughter that acknowledged the joke without really thinking about what it meant. That's right, Connor Klein chimed in, grinning at his own wife. Behind every successful man and all that. Oh, I don't know about that, Marianne Harper said, her voice carrying an edge. Some of us manage to have careers and marriages. Sure, George said smoothly, waving his hand dismissively. But there's something to be said for traditional roles. Dwayne gets to focus on what he does best because Olivia takes care of everything else. It's a partnership. A partnership where one person did all the work and the other person took all the credit. But I didn't say that. I just smiled and took a sip of my wine, a 2019 Bordeaux that cost $300 a bottle, not that anyone here would think I knew that. Must be nice, George continued, his voice getting louder as the bourbon hit his system. He was spiraling, I realized. Drinking too much, talking too much, the stress of his impending investigation making him reckless. Having all that free time. What do you do all day, Olivia? Arrange flowers? Plan dinner parties? The table went quiet. Not quite uncomfortable yet, but getting there. Dwayne shifted beside me, but he didn't jump to my defense. He just reached for his water glass. I keep busy, I said evenly. I'm sure you do, George said, and there was something cruel in his smile now. Something mean breaking through the polished executive veneer. Book clubs, right? Yoga? Maybe a little charity work to feel important? George, Marianne said quietly, a warning in her tone. But George wasn't listening. He was on a roll now, bourbon brave and desperate to feel powerful. I'm just saying, must be nice being a nobody while your husband runs the show. Building companies, making real money, contributing to society. No offense. None taken, I said, though everyone at the table knew that no offense was always followed by something offensive. George leaned back in his chair, gesturing with his bourbon glass. I mean, what do you even talk about at these things? Do you understand what we do? The deals we make, the strategies we implement? He looked around the table, playing to his audience. I bet you couldn't even explain what Meridian Solutions does. Dwayne gave an uncomfortable laugh, not quite meeting my eyes, like he was afraid to do anything else. A nervous, appeasing sound that made my chest tighten. She knows the basics, Dwayne said, like he was defending a child's understanding of adult concepts. The basics, George repeated, grinning. That's sweet. My wife's the same way. She nods and smiles when I talk about work, but I know she's really just thinking about redecorating the living room. More laughter around the table. Connor was shaking his head in amused agreement. It's not an insult, George continued, looking directly at me now. It's just reality. Some people build things. Other people just exist adjacent to the building. Nothing wrong with that. Every king needs a queen, right? Even if the queen's job is just to look pretty and stay out of the way. The table erupted in laughter. Real laughter this time, not polite chuckles. Connor nearly choked on his wine. Marianne tried to hide her smile behind her napkin. And Dwayne, my husband, raised his champagne glass like George had just delivered the punchline of the century. I sat there, surrounded by 200 of Portland's business elite, and felt something inside me shift. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop pretending. When you finally stop making yourself small so other people can feel big. I set down my wine glass carefully, the crystal clicking softly against the tablecloth. "George," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Can I ask you a question?" He turned to me, still grinning, still riding the high of his own cruelty. "Sure, sweetheart. Ask away." And that's when I decided to stop being invisible. That's when I decided to burn it all down. "How does it feel?" I asked, maintaining eye contact with George Suffolk, knowing that this nobody, this flower arranging, yoga attending, book club wife, owns 73% of Meridian Solutions. The laughter died instantly. Like someone had flipped a switch. George's smile froze on his face, champagne glass halfway to his lips. "What?" 73%, I repeated, louder now so the neighboring tables could hear. The conversations around us had started to fade, people sensing something was happening. "How does it feel knowing that I sign every single one of your paychecks? That I approved your salary? That your job, your title, your corner office with the view of the Willamette River, all of it exists because I allow it to exist?" The champagne glass slipped from George's hand. It hit the edge of the table, bounced once, and splashed across his $1,000 suit. He didn't even notice. He was too busy staring at me like I'd just sprouted a second head. His voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat. "That's impossible. Meridian is owned by Cascade Investment Group. Which is owned by Helix Capital Partners," I said calmly. "Which is, in turn, wholly owned by Nightingale Holdings. You've signed hundreds of documents with that name on them, George. Every quarterly report. Every major contract. Every acquisition proposal." The silence at our table had spread outward like ripples in a pond. The neighboring tables had gone quiet. Even the string quartet had finished their piece and hadn't started another. "I'm Nightingale Holdings," I continued. "I've owned controlling interest in this company for 12 years. Every promotion you've received. I approved it. Every bonus. I signed off on it. That Tesla in the executive parking garage? You're welcome." George's face had gone from red to pale to a sickly gray color. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Connor Klein set down his fork very carefully. "This is a joke, right? Someone put you up to this." "It's not a joke, Connor," I said, turning to him. "Your salary is $385,000 annually, plus performance bonuses that averaged $127,000 over the last 3 years. You maxed out your 401k contribution last quarter, and you're currently underwater on your Lake Oswego mortgage by about $200,000. Would you like me to continue?" Connor's face drained of color. Marianne Harper was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "How would you even know all of this?" I pulled out my phone, the secondary one, and opened the app. "Because I review every executive compensation package personally. I approve every major expense over $50,000. I've attended every board meeting for the last 12 years, though none of you knew it because I attend remotely under the name O.J. Nightingale." "O.J. Nightingale?" George's voice was barely a whisper. You've been on every single board call," I finished. "Every strategic planning session. Every emergency meeting when the Singapore deal was falling apart. Remember that board member who insisted we couldn't lay off manufacturing staff during the restructuring 3 years ago? The one who threatened to replace the entire executive team if we didn't find another solution?" George's eyes went wide with recognition. "That was me," I said simply. "I saved 200 jobs. You wanted to cut them to boost quarterly earnings." I said no. The ballroom had gone silent now. 200 people watching our table like it was a stage. I could see servers frozen in place, champagne bottles suspended mid-pour. And Dwayne. God, Dwayne. My husband sat beside me, his face cycling through expressions so quickly I couldn't track them all. Shock. Confusion. Disbelief. And underneath it all, something that looked like betrayal. Dwayne knew, of course, I said, even though his expression told me he absolutely did not. Didn't you, honey? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Wait, Marianne said, her lawyer instincts kicking in despite her obvious shock. If this is true, if you really own the company, then you'd have documentation. Proof. I pulled a business card from my clutch and slid it across the table. Selena Chen. My attorney. I pulled out my phone and typed quickly. I'm texting her now. She can be here in 20 minutes with a complete portfolio of ownership documents, if anyone would like to verify. Every head at the table swiveled, waiting. George finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. Why? Why did you? Hide it? I finished for him. Because I wanted to see what you'd all do if you thought I was powerless. How you'd treat someone you believed had nothing to offer. And now I know. I stood up, smoothing my black dress, the one designed to make me invisible. My attorney is on her way. In the meantime, I think we all need to have a conversation about the future of this company. The silence was deafening. George looked like he might actually pass out. Connor had gone completely still. Marianne was staring at me with something that might have been respect mixed with absolute shock. And Dwayne just sat there, frozen, while his entire world crumbled around him. My phone buzzed. Selena, on my way. 15 minutes out. Bringing everything. I showed the message to the table. My attorney will be here shortly with all the documentation. She'll verify everything I've said. In the meantime, George, we should probably discuss that SEC investigation into your insider trading activities. Seems like something the board should know about before Monday's raids, don't you think? The color that had returned to George's face drained away completely. How did you, he started. Know about it? I finished. I make it my business to know everything about this company. Everything. I looked around the table at the executives who'd spent the evening dismissing me, mocking me, treating me like I was nothing. So here's what's going to happen next. Selena arrived 18 minutes later, striding through the ballroom like she owned it, which, technically, I suppose she did on my behalf. She carried a leather briefcase and wore an expression that said she'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Good evening, she said, setting the briefcase on the table with a decisive thud. I'm Selena Chen, legal counsel to Nightingale Holdings and to Mrs. Jonas. I have complete documentation of everything she just told you. She opened the briefcase with practiced efficiency, pulling out a thick leather portfolio. Ownership structure of Meridian Solutions, including all subsidiary documentation, stock certificates, and board meeting minutes dating back 12 years. Everything's been notarized and filed with the appropriate regulatory bodies. George grabbed the portfolio with shaking hands, flipping through pages frantically. Connor leaned over his shoulder, reading. Marianne stood up to see better, her wine glass forgotten. This can't be. George muttered, but his voice trailed off as he saw his own signature on document after document. Board resolutions he'd voted on. Compensation packages he'd approved. All of them stamped with Nightingale Holdings' corporate seal. Page 17, Selena said helpfully. That's the acquisition document from 12 years ago. Mrs. Jonas purchased her initial 40% stake through Helix Capital Partners. Page 32 shows the secondary acquisition 18 months later, bringing her total to 73%. Page 46 is particularly interesting. That's the emergency board resolution from 3 years ago where someone tried to lay off 200 manufacturing employees to boost quarterly earnings. The board member who blocked it, Connor said slowly, still reading over George's shoulder. O.J. Nightingale. That was me, I confirmed. Attending via secure video conference from my home office. The one you all assumed was just, whatever it is you thought I did all day. Dwayne finally spoke, his voice hollow. 12 years. You've owned the company for 12 years. 13 next month, actually, I corrected. I bought in just before you were promoted to senior analyst. Remember? You came home so excited, said George had personally championed you for the role. Called it your big break. The memory hung in the air between us. Dwayne's face was ashen. That promotion, he said quietly. I approved it, I confirmed. You'd earned it. Your work was excellent. The strategy proposal you'd submitted was brilliant. I made sure George saw it, made sure you got the recognition you deserved. I paused. Every promotion since then? Same thing. I was always watching, Dwayne. Always making sure your talent was recognized. Oh my God, Marianne whispered. She'd pulled out her phone and was clearly searching something. Nightingale Holdings. It's real. There was a profile last year in Forbes on female-led investment firms. They estimated your net worth at, she looked up at me, eyes wide. $800 million. The number hung in the air like a bomb. $847 million as of this morning's market close, I said. Give or take. Someone at a nearby table gasped. The ripple of shock spread outward, whispered numbers and disbelief flowing through the ballroom like wildfire. George had gone still, the portfolio sliding from his hands onto the table. The Whitmore acquisition, he said suddenly. They approached Nightingale Holdings directly. That's why they bypassed me. They were coming to you. They offered $1.2 billion, I confirmed. All-stock deal. My stake would be worth just under $900 million. Selena's been negotiating terms for the past 3 weeks. You're selling? Marianne asked, and I couldn't tell if she was horrified or hopeful. That depends, I said, looking directly at George. On whether current leadership is worth keeping. George's face went from gray to green. He knew. He knew I knew about the SEC investigation. I could see it in his eyes, the desperation of a drowning man who just realized the life preserver was being held by someone he'd spent the evening mocking. Mrs. Jonas, he started, his voice taking on a pleading quality that hadn't been there 30 seconds ago. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't, I cut him off. I understand clearly. I've understood for 12 years exactly who you are, George. Who all of you are. I looked around the table. I've listened to you talk about your wives like they're furniture. I've watched you dismiss women in meetings, talk over female executives, assume that anyone not in a suit couldn't possibly understand business. I picked up my wine glass, took a deliberate sip. And I've documented all of it. Every inappropriate comment. Every discriminatory hiring decision. Every time you've created a hostile work environment. Selena has records of everything. Selena smiled, pulling out a second, thicker portfolio from her briefcase. 12 years of corporate culture documentation. Complete with dates, times, witnesses where applicable. All legally obtained. The color had drained from George's face now. He looked like he might be sick. So here's what's going to happen, I said, setting down my glass. Monday morning at 9 a.m., there will be an emergency board meeting. George, you'll be submitting your resignation effective immediately. Connor, you'll be taking a break while we sort through the finances, and before you panic, I'm not accusing you of anything. Just standard procedure when leadership changes. Connor nodded mutely, looking like he might be sick. Marianne, I continued, turning to the VP of Operations. You'll be stepping in as interim CEO. Marianne's mouth fell open. What? You're qualified, you're competent, and more importantly, in 12 years of documentation, you're one of 3 executives who's never once participated in the boys' club mentality. You've called it out, actually. Multiple times. That's worth something. Marianne seemed incapable of forming words. I don't know what to say. Say yes, I suggested. Unless you prefer I bring in outside leadership. Yes, she said quickly. Yes, of course. Thank you. George made a strangled sound. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. I own 73% of this company, George. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is for you to leave quietly. Submit your resignation, cite personal reasons, and I won't pursue any action for the corporate culture violations. I won't mention the documentation Selena has collected. You'll get your contractually obligated severance package, and you can disappear into retirement or consulting or whatever it is disgraced executives do. His hands were shaking. The SEC investigation will proceed regardless of what I do, I said. The federal government doesn't need my help. But at least this way, you get to resign before they raid your office on Monday morning. You get to keep some dignity. George looked around the table, desperate for support, for someone to defend him. But everyone else was staring at their plates, their phones, anywhere but at him. The man who'd been the center of attention 5 minutes ago was suddenly radioactive. I'll have my resignation submitted by Monday morning, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Email it to Selena, I corrected. I'll be working from home Monday. I've spent enough time in that building pretending to be someone I'm not. I turned to the rest of the table. For everyone else, business continues as usual. Marianne will be reaching out individually to discuss the transition. I expect full cooperation. Are we clear? Nods around the table. Silent, shocked nods. Excellent. I picked up my clutch. Selena, I'll see you Monday for the board meeting. I'll have everything prepared, Selena said, closing her briefcase. And then I turned to Dwayne. My husband, who still hadn't said a word since the initial shock. Who was staring at me like I was a stranger. We should talk, I said quietly. In private. He nodded mechanically and stood, following me through the ballroom like a man in a trance. 200 pairs of eyes tracked our movement. The whispers had already started, a low buzz that would explode into full conversation the moment we were out of earshot. I found a small conference room off the main hallway, empty and dimly lit. Dwayne closed the door behind us, and we stood facing each other in the near darkness. 12 years, he said finally. You've been lying to me for 12 years. I never lied, I corrected. I just didn't tell you the truth. There's a difference. That's semantics, Olivia. You've been, he ran his hands through his hair, making it stand up in all directions. You've been controlling my entire career. Every promotion, every project, everything I thought I earned. You did earn it, I interrupted. Every single promotion was based on merit, Dwayne. Your work is excellent. Your strategies are solid. I just made sure the right people saw them instead of overlooking you for their golf buddies' nephews. But you were pulling strings the whole time. His voice rose. Do you know how that makes me feel? Like my entire career is a fraud. Like I'm just. Like you're being patronized. I suggested. Like your accomplishments don't count because someone more powerful was helping behind the scenes? Like you're just playing a role while someone else makes the real decisions? He stopped, mouth open, finally hearing himself. Welcome to my life, I said softly. Except I wasn't being helped. I was being dismissed. Erased. Called a nobody while I literally owned everything you thought you'd built. Dwayne sank into a chair, head in his hands. I don't even know who you are. I'm the woman who made you coffee every morning, I said. I'm also the woman who owns an $800 million investment portfolio. Both things are true, Dwayne. They always have been. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was raw, broken. We shared a life. Why would you hide something this huge? I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. At first. Because I wanted to see if I could do it. Build something on my own, without anyone knowing. Prove to myself that I was more than just someone's wife. But later? After you'd already done it? Because you were happy, I said simply. You came home every day proud of yourself. Excited about your work. You felt accomplished, successful. If I'd told you, all of that would have been tainted. You would have questioned every achievement, wondered if it was really yours. Like I'm doing now, he said bitterly. Like you're doing now, I agreed. But at least you had years of feeling good about yourself first. Years of confidence that nobody can take away, no matter what you know now. He looked up at me, and there were tears in his eyes. Did you ever respect me? Or was I just some project to you? Some puppet you were controlling? That hit harder than I expected. Of course I respected you. Dwayne, your work is genuinely excellent. The Singapore expansion? That was all you. The Morrison account? You earned that. I never fabricated your talent, I just made sure it was recognized instead of buried. But you were watching. Always watching, always manipulating. Always protecting, I corrected. Do you remember 3 years ago when George wanted to promote Chad Peterson to senior director instead of you? Even though your numbers were better, your proposals were stronger, your team loved you? George wanted Chad because they played golf together. Dwayne's face shifted. He remembered. He'd come home furious that week, ranting about nepotism and unfairness. You got that promotion instead, I continued. Because I called an emergency board meeting and presented both your performance metrics side by side. No names, just numbers. The board voted for the candidate with better results. That was you, Dwayne. Your work spoke for itself. I just made sure someone was listening. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. The coffee, he said finally. Every morning. The tie selection. Remembering my appointments. Writing my speeches. You were still playing the ideal wife even though you were worth $800 million. I was being your wife, I said. Not playing at it. Those things weren't fake, Dwayne. I love you. I've always loved you. The money didn't change that. But it changed everything else. He stood up, pacing the small room. How do I go back to work on Monday? How do I look at anyone there, knowing they all saw? He gestured helplessly. Everyone knows now. Everyone knows my wife owns the company. That she's been making sure you succeeded? Saving your job multiple times? I finished. Is that really so terrible? Yes, he exploded. Yes, it is. Because it makes me look weak. It makes me look like I couldn't succeed without my wife pulling strings. Like I'm some kind of corporate wife? I suggested quietly. Someone whose accomplishments don't count because they had help from someone more powerful? Someone who's seen as an accessory rather than a person in their own right? He stopped pacing, the parallel finally clicking into place. The difference, I continued, is that your accomplishments were real. Your work was genuinely excellent. You just needed someone to make sure the right people saw it. I, on the other hand, was dismissed as a nobody despite literally owning the company. So forgive me if I don't have much sympathy for your wounded pride. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken truths. I need time, Dwayne said finally. I need to think about all of this. About what it means. About us. I understand, I said, though my chest tightened. Take whatever time you need. I'm going to stay at the Columbia Tower Hotel tonight. Maybe a few nights. I can't be in the house right now. I can't look at you and not see, he shook his head. I don't know what I see anymore. Okay, I said quietly. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Did you plan this? Tonight, I mean. The humiliation, the reveal. Was that all calculated? No, I admitted. I was going to keep hiding. Keep playing the role. But then George called me a nobody, and you laughed, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't make myself small for one more second. Dwayne nodded slowly, not looking at me. I'm sorry. For laughing. For not defending you. His voice broke. For all of it. I know, I said. He opened the door and walked out, leaving me alone in the conference room. Through the wall, I could hear the ballroom coming back to life. Conversations rising, shock giving way to gossip, my story already being transformed into legend. I pulled out my phone, the regular one, and called for a car. I stood alone in that conference room for a long time after he left, listening to the ballroom beyond the walls transform my story into legend. Then I called a car, went home to my empty house, and started figuring out who I was now that I'd stopped pretending. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Meridian Solutions headquarters, barely recognizing the place. The old dark wood paneling was gone, replaced by glass and natural light. The stuffy corporate portraits of old white men had been removed, and in their place hung photographs of the actual people who made the company work: engineers, designers, customer service reps, warehouse workers. Faces of every age, race, and background, all of them looking proud to be there. Mrs. Jonas. Marianne appeared from the elevator bank, moving with the confident stride of someone who'd grown into her role as CEO. 6 months had transformed her, from the tentative VP who'd once apologized for speaking up in meetings to this version who commanded boardrooms. "Thank you for coming in. You know you can call me Olivia," I said, shaking her hand. "Old habits." She smiled. "Come on up. I want to show you the new innovation lab before the quarterly presentation." We rode the elevator to the 4th floor, which had been gutted and rebuilt. Where George's executive suite used to sprawl across half the floor, complete with private bathroom, shower, and sitting room, there was now an open workspace filled with natural light and collaborative furniture. 42% profit increase, Marianne said as we walked. Best 6 months in company history. And we did it while implementing 12 weeks of paid parental leave, expanding mental health benefits, and raising starting wages by 18%. "The board is pleased," I said, which was an understatement. The quarterly reports had exceeded every projection. "The culture shift helped more than I expected," Marianne continued. "Turns out when you treat people like humans instead of resources, they're more productive." "Who knew?" Her tone was dry. We passed the old executive dining room, which had been converted into an employee wellness center. Through the glass walls, I could see people using standing desks, yoga mats, and massage chairs. "George's old office?" I asked. "Gender-neutral bathroom and a nursing room for new parents," Marianne said with visible satisfaction. "His mahogany desk is now a changing table." I wish I could have seen his face if he'd known. We reached the innovation lab, a bright open space filled with whiteboards, prototype stations, and collaborative work areas. A team of engineers was clustered around a table, deep in discussion about something involving circuit boards and augmented reality. "This is incredible," I said, meaning it. "It's what the company should have been all along," Marianne replied. Before the old guard turned it into a boys' club with an attendance problem. She pulled out her tablet, showing me graphs and metrics. Employee satisfaction way up. Almost nobody's quitting anymore. We've had 300 applications for our last engineering position. Word is getting out that Meridian is a good place to work now. "And George?" Marianne's expression darkened slightly. "Last I heard, he's doing consulting work from his home in Lake Oswego. Very quiet, very low profile. The SEC investigation wrapped up 3 months ago. He paid a significant fine, got banned from serving as an executive of any public company for 10 years, but avoided jail time." "And Connor?" "The audit cleared him of any wrongdoing," Marianne said. "But he decided to take early retirement anyway. Said he wanted to spend more time with his family." She paused. "I think the shock of everything was too much. He's fishing in Montana now, from what I hear." We walked back toward the executive offices, though calling them that felt wrong now, since they were barely distinguishable from anyone else's workspace. "I have something for you," Marianne said, pulling a leather-bound folder from her desk. "Letters from employees. They wanted to thank you. For the culture change, for the new benefits, she smiled. For burning down the old boys' club so we could build something better." I opened the folder, reading the first letter. It was from a junior developer named Amy who'd been with the company for 8 years. Mrs. Jonas, for the first time here, people actually listen to me. Last month my idea got built instead of dismissed. Thank you for making that possible. I flipped through more letters. A warehouse supervisor who'd been able to take paternity leave for the first time. A customer service manager who'd finally been promoted after being passed over 5 times for less qualified men. An accountant who no longer felt anxious coming to work. You did this, I said to Marianne. These changes, this culture, that's you. You gave me the opportunity, she countered. And you gave me the authority to make real changes. Most people get promoted and discover they still have to fight the old guard every step of the way. You eliminated the old guard completely. They eliminated themselves, I said. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. My phone buzzed. A text from Selena, Whitmore deal finalized. Papers signed. Your stake converts to $950 million in stock, plus market gains brought you to just over $1 billion. Congratulations. Just over $1 billion. Almost a billionaire. Starting from the $500,000 inheritance my father had left me, transformed through 12 years of careful investment and strategic acquisition. Dad would have been proud. 1 year after the Belmont Hotel gala, I sat alone in my Laurelhurst house at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. The house felt enormous. Too many rooms, too much space, too much silence. Dwayne had moved out permanently 8 months ago. The divorce had been finalized in February, quick and clean, since he'd signed everything without argument. He took his clothes, his golf clubs, and his wounded pride. I kept everything else. The kitchen where I used to make his coffee every morning sat dark and unused. My phone sat silent on the marble counter. No calls except Selena about business matters and my mother on Saturday mornings, her voice carefully neutral when she asked how I was doing. The women from the country club, the ones I'd had lunch with for years, now crossed the street when they saw me coming. I'd become a cautionary tale, whispered over champagne at the same tables where I used to sit. Remember Olivia Jonas? Destroyed her husband completely. They say George Suffolk is doing corporate training seminars now for a fraction of what he used to make. The irony was that I'd won everything. Meridian Solutions was thriving. My investment portfolio had crossed the $1 billion threshold last month. The Phoenix Foundation I'd started, funding women who'd sacrificed careers for family, had already helped 37 women restart their professional lives. And I was alone. I poured myself wine, a 2017 Chateau Margaux that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, and stood at the window overlooking my garden. The roses needed pruning. The fountain Dwayne had installed for our 15th anniversary gurgled softly in the darkness. My mother had been right about one thing. I'd stopped being Olivia Chin somewhere along the way and had become Dwayne's wife. And now that I wasn't Dwayne's wife anymore, I didn't quite know who I was supposed to be. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A text from an unknown number. Mom said I should reach out. Coffee sometime? Melissa. Dwayne's daughter from his first marriage, now 26 and working in Seattle. We'd never been close, how could we be, when I'd been playing a role the whole time? I typed back, I'd like that. 3 dots appeared, then, Dad's struggling. Thought you should know. Not asking you to fix it. Just thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to know details. Where was he living? What was he doing? Was he okay? The other part of me, the part that had been called a nobody while everyone laughed, felt nothing but emptiness. Thank you for telling me, I finally typed back. As dawn broke over Portland, painting my empty house in shades of gold and gray, I thought about that night at the Belmont. George calling me a nobody. Dwayne's uncomfortable laugh. The moment I'd decided to stop being invisible. The price of visibility was isolation. The cost of truth was loneliness. But as I watched the sunrise, I knew one thing with certainty: I couldn't go back. Wouldn't go back. Not to the coffee-making, tie-tying version of myself who'd existed for so many years. Being feared and alone was still better than being loved and erased. Even if some mornings, like this one, I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Spring arrived in Portland with its usual drama: torrential rain one day, brilliant sunshine the next. I found myself driving past the Belmont Hotel on a Tuesday afternoon, not intentionally, just taking the long way home from a foundation meeting. The hotel looked the same. Same marble columns, same Art Deco elegance, same valets opening doors for guests who believed they were important. I pulled into the circular drive and sat there for a moment, engine idling, staring at the entrance where everything had changed 15 months ago. A lifetime ago. My phone rang. Selena. "The Whitmore merger is complete," she said without preamble. "Your stock converted at a premium. With 18 months of market gains and the merger premium, current net worth is $1.2 billion. Congratulations, Olivia. You're officially a billionaire. $1.2 billion. Starting from $500,000 and a dream of proving I was more than just someone's wife. How does it feel?" Selena asked. I looked at the hotel entrance, remembering. "Lonely," I said honestly. "Powerful. Vindicated. Empty. All of it at once." Selena was quiet for a moment. "Would you do it differently? If you could go back to that night, would you keep quiet? Stay invisible?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for 15 months. The question that kept me awake at 3 in the morning in my empty house. "No," I said finally. "I wouldn't change anything. Even knowing what it cost you? Especially knowing what it cost me." I watched a couple walk into the hotel, the man's hand resting possessively on the woman's back, guiding her like she couldn't find her own way. Because the alternative was spending the rest of my life pretending to be powerless while everyone around me took credit for my work. The alternative was dying invisible, with all my potential buried under someone else's ambitions. "That's very philosophical for a Tuesday afternoon," Selena said dryly. "I'm sitting outside the Belmont Hotel having an existential crisis." "It's allowed." She laughed. "Fair enough. Listen, the foundation board wants to expand operations. We've got 300 applications for grants this quarter alone. Women who want to go back to school, start businesses, reclaim careers they gave up. 300 women. 300 stories like mine. Fund them all," I said. "Whatever it takes. That's what the money is for." "All 300? Every single one." After I hung up, I sat in the car a moment longer, looking at the hotel where I'd burned down the comfortable lie I'd been living. George Suffolk was somewhere in Lake Oswego, learning what it felt like to be dismissed and overlooked. Connor Klein was fishing in Montana, having discovered that early retirement was better than facing uncomfortable truths. Dwayne was, according to Melissa's careful updates, managing a small marketing firm in Beaverton, making a fraction of what he used to, finally understanding what it meant to build something without invisible help. And me? I was sitting in my Tesla outside a hotel, 1 year older, infinitely wealthier, alone, and somehow more myself than I'd ever been. I pulled out of the circular drive and headed home. Not to the Laurelhurst house, I'd put that on the market last week, too many ghosts, but to the Pearl District condo I'd bought last month. Smaller, modern, mine in a way the house had never been. The price of visibility was isolation. The cost of truth was loneliness. But the reward was looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back. I'd spent years being a nobody so my husband could feel like somebody. Now I was somebody, even if that somebody ate dinner alone most nights. And that was enough. It had to be. Because going back wasn't an option anymore, and going forward meant walking alone into whatever came next. I turned onto the highway, Portland's skyline rising in my rearview mirror, and drove toward my empty condo and my billion-dollar portfolio and my foundation full of women who needed someone to believe in them. The woman who'd made coffee every morning was gone. The woman who owned everything was just beginning. And if that woman sometimes woke up at 3 a.m. wondering if power was worth the price, well, at least she was awake. At least she was visible. At least she was real. At my husband's CEO dinner, they called me a nobody. Then I showed them who signed their paychecks. And I'd do it again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.